All right, how's it going, my magnificent sons of bitches? And I've decided to come back and do an all NBA draft for all times of, you know, what would be considered the greatest of all times, I guess. Do an all time draft. Gonna go through 30 players, so this is gonna be, pretty much for each team. Not sure how the draft orders will fall, you know, but whatever it is, this would be the all time draft. If the all time greatest players were up in the NBA Lotto draft, which, I find it a little bit more appealing that the NBA uses a Lotto formula over the NFL, um, uh, you know, versus the standard NFL thing where you got a lot of tanking and, you're guaranteed to get the top overall pick. I actually find it a little bit fascinating that it's more of a lotto. So this is kind of like a fun little deal that I got going on. And so out of these are the best of the best, the top tier players to ever put on a uniform. So I guess I'll go ahead and start with number 30, and that would be Steph Curry. Steph Curry would probably be much higher in my rankings if he was a shooting guard. Unfortunately, he's a point guard, and given my general proclivities to point guards, he scores far too much for me to put him up higher than 30. He is a phenomenal scorer. He can create his own shots. There's a lot to like, but if he was a shooting guard over a point guard, he would probably be, he may be even top 15, to be honest with you. But since he is a point guard, and that's his true position, I have to put him at number 30. So let's go ahead and go on to number 29, which at number 29, I have your greatness, the GOAT, of what all the little LeBron fans will sit there and tell you. He's the GOAT. He's the GOAT. No. Now, this is the issue. LeBron also would probably be much higher. He'd be one of those guys that would be a top 15 talent if he had a true position on the court. But he goes from small forward to shooting guard to point guard, and it's kind of hard to, I think he's even played some power forward. So you always put LeBron James on the weakest link. So I can't put him up higher because he has no real true position, given his history with his teammates and the teams and the organizations and the way he leaves them in and the decline in the interest of basketball. 29 is about me being generous, and so he does have talent there, but there was never any real, like everybody knew what Kobe played the same position as Jordan. When Jordan came in, they wasn't moving him around. He did move around, but that was to accommodate a teammate, and then he stayed at that position. LeBron keeps moving around everywhere, so there's no true definitive position that I could put him at to measure him up against like a Larry Bird or a Michael Jordan or a Magic Johnson. So for now, I had to put him at number 29. So we'll go into number 28, which is Giannis Antetokounmpo, which he's got the hardest fucking name to pronounce. Once again, if his name was a little bit easier to pronounce, I think that he would be up on the rankings itself. But the kid is a talented kid. He's one of those tweeners right there. He's another one of those kids who, kind of like LeBron, he doesn't really have an identity. Shaq compares him to him, but the game really doesn't fit so much a Shaq. It's what they call evolution, but I don't. It's one of those jack of all trades, master of none to me. But Giannis is one of the top tier talents in today's, and there's no denying it. The kid deserves to be at least considered on the all-time NBA draft. Teams would consider Giannis To be honest with you, so I had to put him on this. So let's go down to number 27, which we got T-Mac Tracy McGrady. He's another one of those phenomenal talents. If he would have been put in better predicaments, he would probably have a few rings. I meant, especially whenever he was coming in the NBA for his size and the position that he played. I mean, T-Mac was really kind of ahead of his time to a degree. Was he the best player at his size for his time? Absolutely. I mean, it would be really, really hard for a lot of guys playing his positions to guard Tracy McGrady because he was so athletic. So I meant, he was a game changer. He was a game changer whenever he went to Toronto and played with his cousin Vince Carter. You could tell that had an immediate impact on the Toronto Raptors. So I have to put T-Mac up here just for the simple, he was a physical specimen whenever he came in. He's a lot bigger, and I believe even Kobe wanted him on his team because as a true wing, man, T-Mac was just, he was bigger than the traditional wings. And now we're seeing that like in your Giannis and in your Kevin Durant's, we're seeing that type of formula. But back then, it was unheard of at the time. So I had to put Tracy McGrady here at number 27. So let's go ahead and get into number 26. Number 26 is the first hype train to actually come in the NBA. That was superficial. It's like your Pepsi Cola style of big promotion. Now you kind of get the same things with your LeBron, your Zion Williams, all these next chosen ones. Well, before LeBron, before Zion, there was Shaq. Now, whenever Shaq came in the NBA, it was pretty much Jordan's league. Before Jordan, it was Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. You had guys in there that were probably way much better at Shaq's position, like Hakeem Olajuwon, David Robinson, Patrick Ewing. But Shaq came in, was pretty much the bully, the physical specimen coming in, the young guy, a lot of hype behind him. I remember if he would have been able to keep in shape and have a little bit more longevity, much like Olajuwon and much like Robinson did, then I would probably put him higher. But I think a lot of it has to do with his attitude, his conditioning. He was kind of lazy to a degree in his career, and I think that affected him a lot. So, Shaquille O'Neal would definitely be number 26. Now, unfortunately, I didn't download a picture for number 25, but I'm just going to go ahead and mention it. Here with Shaq. This player was fucking awesome. I used to love this player whenever I was younger, and that's Shawn Kemp. And had I remembered to, if I would have went down the list, I would have put Shawn Kemp. Definitely, I would have put Shawn Kemp. But Shawn Kemp came in, much like Tracy McGrady. Now, Shawn Kemp wasn't a, small forward. He was a power forward. And he had traditional power forward size. But he was so young, energetic, and just, he played the game with a lot of intensity, a lot of hate, and, power. He was the epitome of a power forward back whenever I was growing up. I mean, awesome dunks. They were just nasty dunks. And he was just so athletic as a power forward. So at number 25, I had to put Shawn Kemp. Sorry I didn't get the picture of Shawn Kemp, but we'll go ahead and get on to number 24. Who do I have at number 24? And that's this man, Paul Pierce. Now, I actually worked with this man's aunt for a little while back in the 90s. This was before Paul Pierce became the, part of the Big Three and winning championships. But Paul Pierce, for his time, and really, he was that next step into small forwards. And if he would have gotten on a team with Kobe Bryant, there's no telling what them guys would have done. But Paul Pierce was, to me, about as fundamental if you were going to build a small forward, Paul Pierce and maybe Scottie Pippen would be who you would want. That would be your template right there. And he just there was a coolness about Paul Pierce. There was that, he was always. I mean, like I said, he even before he became the big three, he was leading, the Celtics into the playoffs. So, yeah, definitely, I had to put Paul Pierce in here with his resume and his abilities. I know that a lot of people hate him. A lot of the LeBron fanboys hate him because he was being honest. Basically, called LeBron right. That's tells you that this guy has a mind for the game. So I had to put Paul Pierce. Paul Pierce is my number 24 pick overall as far as all-time NBA drafts. So at number 23 we have the mailman Karl Malone, and of course you have to put one of the league's biggest scorers on this list. You know what I'm saying? He was one of the league's all-time. He was the second leading scorer. I think LeBron has passed him up. LeBron will probably pass up Kareem, but everything with LeBron has to have an asterisk beside it. This man delivered, and that's why they called him the mailman. And while he wasn't as physical or as dominating as Sean Kemp, um, he was consistent. He would be to Sean Kemp what Hakeem was to Shaquille O'Neal. He may not have been that power forward that was going to be dominated, try to be over, but he was going to win. He was going to play his job no matter what, and he was probably one of the better power forwards of all time, especially as far as like scoring wise. So we'll go ahead and get into number 22, and we're going to get into another power forward, and that is Sir Charles Barkley. And I give Charles Barkley and Karl Malone were similar in a lot of ways. They were both power forwards. They were both reliable scorers at power forward, which, is kind of one of those things to where a power forward is not normally your leading scorer, much like Sean Kemp. These are anomalies. But the reason why I like Charles Barkley just a little bit more than, Karl Malone and Sean Kemp is because he's kind of a combination of the two. Charles would play with a lot of intensity. He could play with ugly intentions, much like Sean Kemp. At the same time, it was methodical. It was a chess game for Charles. And, while Charles was playing, he wasn't quite the bully that Sean Kemp was, but at the same time, he still wasn't quite the as reliable as the mailman, but he was a combination of in between. And he was a great chess player. He would get into people's heads that he was playing, and he would use a psychological approach to basketball. And he's a fun guy. He gets his teammates involved. That's somebody that you really, really want on your team. So that's exactly why I have to put Charles Barkley ahead of Karl Malone and ahead of Sean Kemp. So let's go ahead and get into number 21, and that's the Admiral. And this guy has to be one of the most athletic centers to ever play the game. Maybe outside of Wilt, I would probably say he's the most athletic center. As far as and he's the guy that you really, really want as a center being on your team, being that centerpiece for the center, because David Robinson could run like a fucking gazelle. And, he could get up and down that court, which made him efficient on both defense and offense. You go back, look in the point differential whenever David Robinson was in the game versus whenever he wasn't in the game, and you'll see a drastic change. The man was one of the quintessential big men centers at the time whenever centers dominated the game. So I definitely have to put David Robinson at number 21. So who do I got at number 20? I got Dirk Nowitzki. It's kind of hard for me not to put a 7-footer that can shoot threes and play the wing position on here, you know, technically he would have been a true center back in the 90s, but you know he was a wing, and I could tell you that you know for wing players that at the time, like I said, you had guys like Tracy McGrady who were coming in, and this guy is one of those guys, much like Tracy McGrady, that whenever you put up a 7 footer against a 6'7", a wingman, and you know he's gonna have problems, and so you know, for his size and to be able to move and have the athleticism at his size was almost unheard of at the time. You know, generally, 7 footers played in the post, played in the center. They didn't do a lot of moving. You know, now you had guys out there like Wilt Chamberlain and David Robinson that could move, much like wing players, but generally they played in the post. Dirk Nowitzki was one of those guys who could play in the post or play outside. He was a great wingman, so I had to put him at number 20. He was just a fucking anomaly at the time, and almost unheard of. So I'll go ahead and get into number 19. Who do I have at number 19? And of course, that is Michael Jordan's wingman, Scottie Pippen. Now, if Jerry Rice played in the NBA, he would be Scottie Pippen. Scottie was a physical specimen, always stayed in shape, always conditioned. One of the top defenders, generally year in and year out in the league. Scottie really was a driving factor in Michael Jordan getting a lot of those titles. His dominance on his side of the ball, he was definitely one of the best small forwards at his time. And no doubt that you know Michael doesn't get all those rings without Scottie. So I had to put Scottie in at number 19. He is one of the best at his position. Definitely, probably one of the physically best. He's probably the best athletically at his position, definitely. But I had to put Scottie Pippen at number 19. And at number 18, we have Patrick Ewing. Now, Patrick Ewing was probably one of the better scorers inside at center for his position. Another dominating big man that could, you know, use his size to his advantage and go ahead and make life hectic in the middle of the and I would probably say that, you know, him coming in just a year before Olajuwon, he set the tone for what the you know 80s and 90s essentially became, and that was the year of the those were the years of the big men, and you had to have a big presence in the middle, a dominating defender. Patrick Ewing was one of those guys where if you saw him on the court, you're like, oh man, you know we're going to be in trouble. It's going to be a long game for us because Patrick Ewing, you knew was going to bring it night in and night out. He probably led one of the most lethal teams as far as a defensive team in the league at the time in the New York Knicks. So at number, we'll go ahead and get into at number 17, I have, and I don't know why I skipped this. I must have skipped one. So we'll go ahead and say that this is number 16. So I missed number 17. There's another player that I should put in here, which I can make a list. I can go ahead and name a bunch of players that I could put in here. But we'll go ahead and go with number 16, which is Isaiah Thomas. As far as Isaiah Thomas goes, I think he was a better point guard as far as being a better point guard than like a Steph Curry because he did score. The team was built on his scoring capabilities, but he didn't score near as much. He was able to distribute the ball a little bit more than Steph Curry. I think that, you know, it was kind of like the template for Steph Curry. He had a better inside game, I would probably say, than Steph Curry, but that's debatable too. I just think that he could set his team up, and I think that he could set up the offense a little bit better than Steph. I'm not saying that Steph could be worse at it. He could be Russell Westbrook, so he's not completely horrible. But I just think that Isaiah Thomas got his teams in better positions to win games than Steph Curry did. So I had to put Isaiah Thomas on here. He was definitely one of those opponents Magic Johnson had to face that would, give him fits and whatnot. A great defender, which I really like my point guards to be great defenders. Isaiah Thomas was a great defender. This is why I like Lonzo Ball so much, is because he's a good defender. You don't have to score 20 points a game as a point guard to be a great point guard. You get, 7 or 8 assists a game. You get a few steals a game. You get a couple of blocks a game. Get some rebounds a game. Those stats matter. And I think that as far as an all-around point guard, I had to put Isaiah Thomas just ahead of Steph Curry. Being how the NBA really doesn't play a lot of defense right now, that I gotta give the tilt to Isaiah Thomas. So at number 15 we have Oscar Robertson. Now, Oscar Robertson was probably Isaiah Thomas before Isaiah Thomas. I'm sure that's where Isaiah got a lot of his inspiration from. But this man was a triple-double machine. And that's how you play the game as a point guard. I don't care who you are. That's how you play the game. I mean, he was an all-around point guard that put his team in positions to win. And that's really kind of what you want to see. He did score a little bit more than I like for a point guard, which is fine. There are those certain point guards that are allowed to go ahead and score, a little bit more because their teams rely more on their scoring. So, I prefer like a Jason Kidd type pass first mentality. However, with Robertson, he was more of a scorer, much like Isaiah. And like I said, his team needed it at the time. And I think you'd be hard-pressed for anybody to disagree that Oscar Robertson, isn't worthy of being the number 15th pick overall in the all-time NBA draft. So now we're going to go ahead and go into number 14, which is a true small forward, Elgin Baylor. He was the first one really to make that wingman position really stick out. Like, the Lakers brought him in just because of the flash and the spectacle that was Elgin Baylor. A very underrated scorer. He's very rarely mentioned in the GOAT debate, which is unfortunate. But, he's kind of like the Paul Pierce, of his time. He went to work, was fundamental about his job. It wasn't all about Elgin Baylor, But with that being said, he was consistent. He would come into work. He would put up a score. And while he wasn't the flashiest guy that the media and the paparazzi would always follow, he was consistent. He was dependable. So now we go back and we go into my number 13 pick. And now when we start getting into these, you could change them around a little bit. You can tool with them a little bit, because now we're getting into some of the people that are just, phenomenal. They're just game changers, day one, coming in and really building your franchise up where you're going to be competitive. So at number 13, I got the Iceman, George Gervin. This guy was a scoring machine. He was the first what you would consider like a LeBron James, a Michael, fucking just, that killer instinct that you talk about Kobe, Michael Jordan, and all these guys having. If George Gervin played in a bigger market, like a Dr. J, like a Michael Jordan, if he would have played in one of those big markets, then you would probably be talking about George Gervin being one of the greatest and comparing him to Kobe and Mike and Dr. J. Which, mind you, it's those guys right there that everybody talks about changing the NBA fundamentally. And he was alongside Dr. J. He played in the same era. They had some battles. But if he were to have been in a bigger market, you would have been like, oh, man, George Gervin has to go down. And he's played with Michael Jordan before, but that was, whenever he was well on his way out. But George Gervin was definitely one of the best scorers in the NBA, and definitely, deserves a spot this high on this list. He was just exactly what his name says, Iceman. And even whenever he came into the NBA later on, he was still breaking scoring records. So he was doing it in the ABA, he was doing it in the NBA, and no doubt that George Gervin, if he would have had some talent around him, won a few championships, he would definitely be in the greatest of all times conversation. So we go on to number 12. Who do I have at number 12? And I have Kevin Durant. Now, Kevin would probably be higher on this list if he had a bit of more of a killer instinct. I like Kevin's game. He reminds me a lot more of Dr. J. You know, he does everything so effortlessly. You know, he can be so dominating. At 7 foot, another wing, much like, Dirk Nowitzki. I do believe that he's probably a little bit more athletic than Dirk Nowitzki was, who, in his own right, was pretty athletic. But if he were to have that instinct of, say, a Kobe Bryant or a Michael Jordan, where he was just going to take the game and he was just going to score, and he wasn't going to let his team lose. Well, because I think that, between Kevin Durant and LeBron James, Kevin Durant has more of that ability, particularly at his size, and being able to get to the basket. Like I said, watching him kind of glide in the air, doing it so effortlessly, he reminds me more of Dr. J than he does Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. But definitely a lethal scorer. If you were going to sit there and say, man, I need somebody to build around, you would definitely have to consider Kevin Durant as being that franchise guy. And in some cases, you could probably make a case for him being the number 1 overall pick. However, I put him at number 12 right now just because, he hasn't reached that Mamba mentality, I guess, or that Jordan level of just, I'm going to win at all cost. And so, he has that ability. Will he tap into that? Will he get another title? We'll have to see what this year plays out, because we could be looking at a whole new Kevin Durant coming into next year. So at number 11, I have, well, of course, you have to have Wilt Chamberlain on this list. Now, Wilt Chamberlain was an athletic freak. He was an Olympian. He as far as like track, field sports, decathlon, all that stuff was Wilt Chamberlain. He was one of the stronger people to ever play the game. He was one of the fastest people to ever play the game. He was one of the tallest people to ever play the game. And the sheer fact that it would be a travesty just to leave him off this list, based that he didn't win a lot of games. He had some formidable opponents and whatnot. But I had to put him in as number 11. Some people claim that Wilt Chamberlain, and like I said, you can have this opinion, but some people claim that Wilt Chamberlain is the greatest of all time. Greater than Jordan, greater than Magic, but he did have some stiff competitions. And so, yeah, it's up for debate. But I put Wilt Chamberlain at number 11. At number 10, I have Julius Erving. And the reason why I put Julius Erving over Wilt Chamberlain is because he fundamentally changed the game. He was at first wow factor guy in the ABA, that marketable guy. He was Jordan before Michael Jordan. And the league marketed off of Dr. J and his abilities. Much like Kevin Durant, he just made it look so effortless. If you went back and watched highlights of Dr. J, it's almost like he's floating to the basket. Like there's almost not any effort at all in his scoring, and he does it so easy. He just makes it look easy. So at number 10 of all time, I would have to take Julius Erving. So now we're getting into the nitty-gritty, which is number 9, and that would be Larry Bird. And, for what Larry Bird did for the Celtics and the, heights that he took the Celtics, winning championship after championship, I had to put Larry Bird on here. He wasn't the most athletic. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the fastest by no means. but he could create his own shots. He had a lot of moves. He was absolutely a basketball savant, if you want to sit there and call it that. Had a high IQ, could hit can hit shots from all over the court, and for his time, for not being the strongest, for not being the fastest, he was pretty fucking unguardable. Um, he just had all the right moves. He was more quick than he was fast, and he used it to his advantage. I definitely, if you're talking about the '80s, it was Larry Bird and Magic Johnson that carried us through the '80s. So you have to put Larry Bird. I put him in at number 9. His contributions to basketball alone, you know, along with Magic Johnson, I think that this kind of justifies this spot a little bit. Which brings me in to number 8, which is, of course, his all time rival, Magic Johnson. Now, whenever I was younger, it was Magic Johnson this, Magic. This was before Michael Jordan. I meant, it was always Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson is the greatest basketball player of all times. And, he played point guard. And, as point guard, I think that Magic Johnson fits the mold perfectly of a point guard. To me, if there was a point guard, if you were going to make a point guard, Magic Johnson would definitely be the point guard that I would want. Because he wasn't too greedy, averaging 16 points a game. Had a lot of assists, could make a lot of shots happen, open up shots. He's one of those guys that, was a master at his position. He wasn't one of these guys that were switching around. Oh, I'm gonna go ahead and switch off to small forward. He could have, because he's big enough to play small forward. He's big enough to play power forward. However, he played point guard, and like I said, he stayed true to that position. Magic Johnson, to me, is one of the better, if not the best, point guard of all time. Just because, it comes down between him and Oscar Robertson. I'll be honest with you. Magic Johnson has more titles to back it up. I think that Oscar Robertson has Magic on the statistics. But I do like the fact that he wasn't greedy. He wasn't scoring 40 points a game. This is why I don't put guys like Allen Iverson on the list, is because if Allen Iverson would have been a shooting guard, then yeah, he's going to make the list because of his abilities. But you're a point guard, so I expect point guard shit out of you. And so Magic Johnson, definitely up here. I think that number 8 isn't too high for Magic Johnson. So we'll go to number 7, which I got Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. And this guy kind of, revolutionized the center position, for his time. I think that the tone was set by Kareem. You could tell Hakeem changed his name to Hakeem because of Kareem. But he had taken a lot of stuff from Kareem, and then he incorporated it into his game. Big 7-footer, very athletic. Like I said, more quick than he was fast. But definitely, Hakeem had so much athletic ability. He had the moves. I mean, much like Charles Barkley, he was a chess player as a center. He could go in there, make people look silly. He could make people look foolish. And that's pretty much what he did, dominating Shaquille O'Neal in a 4-game sweep in the NBA Finals, who had planned to come in there and bully Hakeem. But like I said, David Robinson, Shaquille O'Neal, Patrick Ewing, they all, had issues guarding Hakeem. And, even Michael Jordan says that if, the Rockets ever got out of the Western Conference, there'd be no way that the Bulls could have stopped him. So, I have to put Hakeem Olajuwon on here as, at number 7. He's probably one of the, if not the best center of all time, in my opinion, as far as playing the game of just being fun and watching it. So I go ahead and give number 7 to Hakeem Olajuwon, which brings me to number 6. And who else could I give number 6 to but the guy that inspired Hakeem Olajuwon, Kareem. Kareem was the innovator of a lot of what Hakeem Olajuwon was doing. He had the moves. He had, like I said, it was always being one step ahead of your opponent. And Kareem was that guy. Kareem was that guy that, from the legacy of Wilt Chamberlain, of Bill Russell, he was the guy that was handed the baton from those guys. And he took it and ran with it. And plus, the guy ended up fighting Bruce Lee at the end of a movie. So how the hell can you not have, Kareem this high on your list? It's just impossible. But the sheer fact is that, what Hakeem could do in that court, in that ring to the bigger guys, to much bigger opponents, it was just, unbelievable. His game and his level of performance and his athleticism. Yeah, you would definitely want Kareem on your team if you were to sit there and build around somebody. Kareem at number 6, it's just, there's just nothing else to say. You would definitely make that pick. So now we go to number 5, which is Bill Russell. Wilt Chamberlain's worst nightmare, the 8-time NBA championship. Bill Russell was about as fundamental as you could get, particularly at center. He was probably the most fundamental center of his time, and maybe ever. I mean, the guy was a hard worker. He was a team player, and, he was probably one of the premium defenders. Whenever you have to shut down a athletic freak like, Wilt Chamberlain, like I said, decathlon, and you perform at the level that Bill Russell did, well, that you're a special player. And so, most certainly, Bill Russell at number 6 is at number 5 is an absolute steal of all time. And like I said, with Bill Russell, you're definitely going to get some titles. You're definitely going to get championships. That's going to happen. So I had to put Bill Russell at number 5. And like I said, some of these guys you could switch around if you don't necessarily like them. But yeah, definitely I had to put Bill Russell at number 5. So at number 4, who do I have? I have Kobe Bryant. And Kobe and Michael were kind of inspired by the same person. That'd be Dr. J. And a lot of people think that Kobe was stealing Michael's moves, maybe to a degree. Kobe seen Michael as, the next Dr. J, so he did kind of incorporate a lot of his stuff. But ultimately, at the end of the day, these are both prodigies of Dr. J. And to me, and even Clyde Drexler was kind of the same kind of product of Dr. J. All 3 of those guys was. I think that Kobe is probably a little bit better than Clyde Drexler, but he's probably closer to Clyde in his game than he was Michael Jordan. But a premium defender nonetheless. He's one of those guys that you could definitely build a team around. You get him a great wingman, and he's going to win titles, much like Jordan did. And, he's going to be... he's one of those guys who's, going to be persistent about winning. And, he has that intensity, he has that fury, he wants to be the absolute best. So you want that guy on your team. And in some form or capacity or another, you want that guy that's going to be there, that's going to be dedicated, who's going to bring in those titles. And I definitely have to bring in Kobe Bryant, as far as like all-time NBA drafts, I have him right at number 4. So at number 3, I have Tim Duncan. And of course, Tim Duncan, 7 foot, the stuff that he could do athletically, could physically handle. He was strong enough to handle guys like Shaquille O'Neal, yet athletic, much like David Robinson, to play both sides of the court. Really solid, really fundamental. Whenever you hear people talk about David Robinson, he is the most fundamental power forward and probably the best power forward to ever play the game. I mean, he's not out there shooting 3-pointers. He's not out there trying to play small forward. He is a master and an expert. And whenever I was doing this list, I had to go back and look. Okay, this guy, he plays what position? He plays multiple positions. Tim Duncan, that was it. It was power forward. That's what he played, and he did it so great that he ended up winning 5 NBA championships. Having somebody that consistent, understanding, knowing his role, uh, you're going to win titles. Much like Bill Russell, you're going to win titles with Tim Duncan on your team. How many? It just depends. But you're going to win titles with Tim Duncan. So, of course, you're taking Tim Duncan. I got Tim Duncan number 3 overall on this list. So, who's number 2? Oh, my goodness. Now we're getting down to the nitty gritty. And that would be Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, by far, the most. I think that if, he was so dedicated to winning. Michael Jordan was so dedicated to what he had to win at everything. But he was so dedicated to winning, I think that if he weren't playing basketball and he didn't have these sports to play, he would probably be wearing a hockey mask down at Crystal Lake, killing teenagers, probably. Because he was that much of a sociopath. He had to win. That narcissistic, sociopathic, mentality of Jordan, he's just addicted to winning. And so, Michael Jordan is one of those guys that you would most definitely like on your team if you're wanting NBA championships. I mean, he's gonna play. He played while he had the flu. You can see right here he has a cut over his eyes, and he's still gonna play. He damn near got mugged, and he's gonna be out there. He's just addicted to winning. It's his mentality. So no doubt that if you're gonna have an all-time draft and Jordan is available at number 2, you're damn sure going to pick up Michael Jordan at number 2. I can't believe that he fell to 3, and the Portland Trailblazers didn't. Unless you're the Portland Trailblazers, you're not picking Jordan up at 2, but everybody else were picking Jordan up at 2. So definitely Jordan is my number 2 pick overall for the all-time NBA draft. So, who is my number 1 pick all time of the NBA draft? Well, that's none other than Kyrie Irving. Oh no! And I know everybody's like, oh, okay. How can you go to Kyrie? How can you say Kyrie? Just Kyrie Irving. I hear a lot of shit talk about Kyrie Irving. Well, here's the deal. Kyrie Irving's not a fucking pussy like half of the people that y'all follow in all these professional sports. It takes balls to stand up to a lot of these fucking social justice warrior Karen and Kyles in the community. You need your vaccine. And fucking Kyrie told you about that VAXX. You can go fuck yourself. That takes a lot of fucking balls. I don't care who you are. That's somebody that you want leading your team, passing the ball, distributing the ball, knowing who needs to be in what place, looking out for everybody's best, interest and whatnot. He's a more intellectual, smart. He's gonna do right for himself and his team. That's a leader right there. That's somebody that's gonna be like, fuck off. But they'll sit there and follow LeBron James while LeBron James is crying on the court. The number 29 pick, he's over there crying about a foul. And then having Patrick, that's stupid. Nobody wants to see that stuff. Basically that, where they say that LeBron beat the greatest team of all time. No, that was the greatest team ever assembled. No, that was Kyrie. Kyrie beat the greatest team ever assembled. But everybody likes to throw it on LeBron. No, it was Kyrie. If Kyrie doesn't hit half them shots that he hits, if Kyrie's not there, LeBron's already said that, he's, he had already played without Kyrie. Kyrie being there is ultimately what ended up, is why the Cleveland Cavaliers upset the Golden State Warriors. So, of course, you're going to want Kyrie on your team. somebody who is going to be that leader. LeBron's not a leader. LeBron's a role player. LeBron does exactly what LeBron is told to do. He's going to go out there and say, I'm going to cry because of Tyree Nichols. And he'll do that shit, and then he'll flop around, and he'll act like he's been mugged and stuff like that. Kyrie just plays good basketball. He plays good basketball. So that's what I want to see in my organization. So the number one overall all-time NBA draft, Kyrie Irving, is my number one pick, first overall. So anyways, you people tell me what you think. You like, sub, do the shit YouTube, Facebook, wherever I put this up at. Tell me to do to get over. And for now, I'm out.